The first sign wasn't a light in the sky. It was static. An old radio observatory in the Chilean desert caught it, a burst of subspace noise so faint it should have been dismissed as background radiation. But one technician stayed after hours, running filters, adjusting the array. When the message finally cut through, she froze. The voice wasn't human. It was strained, desperate. A language full of clicks and harmonics, translated only after weeks of work. But the meaning, once clear, chilled every interpreter who heard it. "We are dying. We are burning. Help us, anyone, please help us." For decades, Earth had prepared for this moment. SETI, the space race. Probes hurled into the void with golden records and greetings. But no one expected the first clear signal from another civilization to be a distress call. The UN convened. Politicians screamed about risk. Generals warned of traps. But then came the footage, decoded fragments of video. Alien cities on fire. Ships falling from orbit. Creatures swarming across the ground in tides. The world saw it. And for once, humanity agreed. We couldn't ignore it. The first expeditionary relief fleet left orbit within a year. A patchwork armada. American carriers, Russian destroyers, Chinese colony ships, European research vessels. Crews volunteered in droves. Soldiers, scientists, medics, mechanics, even farmers and miners. No one said it aloud, but everyone thought the same thing. If Earth was ever in their place, wouldn't we want anyone, to answer? The fleet emerged from fold space like a scar tearing across the stars. 23 ships, human-made, bristling with weapons and patched with every bit of tech humanity could scavenge. None of them elegant. None of them graceful. Just hard steel and ugly armor, built for survival, not for beauty. The alien system loomed ahead, a sun burning too hot, a planet scarred and blackened. Orbit was littered with debris, broken ships, shattered stations, and the skeletal remains of something larger, something that once might have been a fleet. "Jesus," someone whispered on the bridge of the UNSS Valiant. The transmission was supposed to prepare them, but seeing a world torn open was different. Status. Captain Elena Morrow barked. Radiation spikes across the surface. Cities gone. I'm detecting life signs, but weak, scattered. And, ma'am, we're being scanned. The crew stiffened. The first contact was coming. A flicker of light pulsed in the void. Something was moving among the wreckage, ships, smaller than human cruisers, drifting on failing engines. Their hulls glowed faintly blue, carved with symbols that no human could read. They looked half dead already. And then, a voice crackled through every comm channel at once. "Identify yourselves." It was sharp, guttural, but the fleet's translators worked quickly. Captain Morrow stood tall, smoothing the front of her uniform. She knew this moment would be remembered forever. "This is Captain Elena Morrow of the United Nations Expeditionary Relief Fleet. We heard your distress call. We've come to help." There was silence. Too long. The alien ships didn't move. Didn't answer. Then, finally, humans. The word came with a mix of disbelief and dread. On the alien flagship, chaos unfolded. The survivors, a species called the Keth, had expected one of the core races to arrive. The Veil Scholars, perhaps, or the Serene Shan Healers. But humans? The Deathworlders? The primitives who'd only just reached the stars a century ago? The Keth commander's crest quivered in agitation. Of all the galaxy, why them? Why now? The answer came soon enough. The swarm. It appeared first as movement in the debris field, organic ships, fused with chitin and metal, writhing forward like predators scenting prey. Hundreds of them. Contact. Multiple bogies incoming. The human fleet went on alert instantly. Guns charged. Fighters launched. And in that moment, the aliens watching them saw something they hadn't expected. No hesitation. No endless debate. The humans simply prepared to fight. The Keth commander opened a direct channel. His voice was strained, resigned. "You should leave. You cannot face them. We have lost entire fleets to the swarm. You are too few. Too fragile. If you stay, you die with us. Captain Moreau didn't blink. Yeah, she said, voice steady. Fragile. That's what they always say about us. But here's the thing, fragile things fight the hardest to survive. And then she gave the order that changed everything. Engage. The void lit up. Human warships thundered forward, engines screaming. Missiles streaked through the black, cutting across swarm formations. Railguns tore chunks out of the chitinous hulls. Fighters darted like wasps, weaving between massive claws and spines. But the swarm didn't falter. They crashed against the human line, ramming, clawing, spilling acid across hull plating. Alien watchers gasped in horror, certain this was the end. And then they saw the humans fight up close. Swarm drones boarded a destroyer, ripping through bulkheads like paper. The Keth knew what came next: slaughter. No species survived a swarm boarding. But humans? Humans welcomed it. Footage streamed across the alien flagship. Marines in sealed armor, armed with shotguns and flamethrowers, charged head-on. They fought in corridors knee-deep in acid blood, laughing through their comms, cracking jokes even as claws tore into them. Die, you ugly bastards, one screamed, before igniting his own fuel tank to torch a nest. It wasn't just war. It was madness. It was joy. The aliens trembled as they watched. To them, humans weren't soldiers. They were predators unleashed. By the time the swarm retreated, limping back into the void, half the human fleet was scarred, but still standing. Smoke poured from breached hulls. Medics worked frantically in makeshift triage bays. And yet they had survived. The Keth commander finally opened comms again. His voice was hushed, almost reverent. You're Deathworlders. Captain Moreau wiped blood from her cheek. Her ship smelled of smoke and scorched metal. She met his gaze without flinching. Yeah, she said. You called for help. And Death answered. The battle was over, but no one on the human fleet dared to celebrate. The swarm had retreated, not been destroyed. On the bridge of the Valiant, the smell of scorched plastic lingered, panels sparking in places where acid had eaten through. Crew members worked in silence, patching what they could. Some had bandages on their arms or faces. Others limped as they worked. Yet no one left their post. Status on casualties? Captain Moreau asked, voice heavy. 73 confirmed dead. 140 wounded, her XO replied. She closed her eyes. First blood in a war they barely understood. And yet, despite the loss, she knew they had accomplished the impossible. They had held. The Keth flagship requested a meeting. Inside its fractured hull, the survivors gathered. The Keth were tall, insectoid but regal, with elongated heads and 4 arms. Their armor was ceremonial, once bright but now cracked and scorched. Their city world, once a shining jewel of the Alliance, was nothing more than a corpse spinning in orbit. The human delegation entered armed but cautious. Marines flanked Captain Moreau and Dr. Marcus Hayes, the mission's chief xenobiologist. The Keth commander stepped forward, mandibles twitching. You fight like nothing we have ever seen, but you do not understand what hunts us. You should leave before you share our fate. Dr. Hayes adjusted his glasses. We came because you asked for help. If we're going to fight this thing, we need to know what we're up against. Tell us everything. The room went silent. Then, with a slow, pained gesture, the Keth commander activated a holo display. It was worse than anyone expected. The swarm filled the projection, vast hive ships, kilometers long, pulsing with veins of bioluminescence. Their movements weren't random. They flowed like rivers of flesh and steel, coordinated by a hive intelligence that spanned light years. They are not a species, the commander said bitterly. They are a hunger. They do not build. They do not reason. They consume. The holo shifted to show battle footage from the Keth archives. Fleets of elegant Korace ships, sleek, silver, powered by technologies humanity had never dreamed of, engaged the swarm. Energy lances burned through the void. Shields glowed with radiant light. And then the swarm adapted. The ships twisted, morphing their carapaces mid-battle to resist new weapon frequencies. Acid that once splattered uselessly against shields suddenly cut through like fire on dry grass. Keth soldiers tried to fight hand-to-hand, only to be torn apart as the swarm injected them with spines that grew inside their bodies. "We lost 9 fleets," the commander whispered.
9.
"Each larger than yours. Each better armed. And still, they fell. Do you understand now? You cannot win. None of us can." The human delegation exchanged glances. They did understand. They understood the fear, the hopelessness, the despair. But they also understood something the Keth didn't. Captain Moreau leaned forward, voice low and steady. "You tried to outthink them, to outtech them, to outlast them. That's not how you fight monsters like this." The Keth commander tilted his head. "And how do you fight them?" "You fight dirty," she said. "You fight like you've got nothing to lose. You adapt faster than they do. You cheat. You claw. You bleed. And if they push you to the ground, you get back up, spitting blood in their faces." The Keth delegation recoiled. To them, it was madness. But Dr. Hayes was smiling grimly. "That's why humans might stand a chance," he said softly. "Because, to us, survival isn't rational. It's instinct." The Keth commander hesitated, mandibles clicking. He wanted to dismiss them, wanted to tell them to leave. But then he remembered the footage, humans laughing as they burned through swarm drones. Soldiers fighting even as acid ate through their armor. Medics carving parasites out of their comrades with their bare hands, refusing to let them die. Perhaps madness was exactly what the galaxy needed. But even madness has limits. The swarm was not done. Across the system, hive ships stirred, alerted by the loss of their vanguard. They pulsed with hunger. And now, their attention was fully on the humans. The aliens had seen countless fleets fall, and they had no reason to believe this one would be different. But still, something in the humans unsettled them. Something the swarm itself might come to fear. The swarm was coming back. Sensors lit up across the fleet as the Keth's long-range scans detected massive hive signatures moving through fold space. Not just scouts this time. Entire broods. Dozens of hive ships, each carrying thousands of drones. On the bridge of the Valiant, tension hung heavy. "We're outnumbered at least 20-1, the tactical officer muttered. The Keth envoy, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. "You must retreat. No fleet can face that and live." Captain Moreau didn't flinch. "Retreat isn't an option. Not while your survivors are still down there." The Keth envoy's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "But there is no hope." A grin tugged at the corner of Moreau's mouth. "Good thing humans don't run on hope." The preparation. The fleet transformed almost overnight. Human engineers, men and women who had once worked in shipyards, oil rigs, and factories, turned the alien wreckage into weapons. They stripped down Keth tech, jury-rigged it with human parts, and mounted it to the hulls. "They're desecrating our ships," one Keth soldier whispered in horror as humans cut apart sacred alloy plating to build crude missile racks. But within hours, those same racks spat out enough firepower to level cities. The medics were no different. Swarm parasites infected wounds, laying eggs inside flesh. Where other species surrendered the infected to mercy killings, humans fought back. Dr. Aisha Rahman led an improvised surgery ward. She worked with blades, fire, and willpower alone, cutting parasites from screaming soldiers while shouting at them to hold on. "You're not dying on me today. You hear me? Not today." To the Keth, it was barbaric. To the humans, it was Tuesday. The soldiers. The Marines trained in zero-G corridors, perfecting ambush tactics. They built makeshift flamethrowers from fuel lines. One squad even mounted railgun coils into exocets, creating weapons no sane core-race soldier would ever dare fire at close range. The aliens watched them with uneasy fascination. "Why do they laugh?" one Keth medic asked. "Because humans did laugh. In the mess halls. In the armories. Even while cleaning acid scars from their armor. They cracked jokes about being bug spray with legs." They bet rations on who could kill the most drones. They whistled old Earth war songs that carried through the decks. They laugh, a human translator explained to the bewildered aliens, because if we stop, the fear wins. The first strike. When the swarm arrived, they expected to face yet another doomed fleet. They advanced in endless numbers, filling space like a tide of living metal. But this time, the prey fought dirty. The first trap was sprung in the debris field. Human engineers had hidden nuclear warheads inside hollowed-out wreckage, rigged to detonate when the swarm passed through. The void lit up as 3 hive ships were torn apart instantly. Before the swarm could adapt, fighters dove in, not in cautious formations, but in reckless swarms of their own. They weaved between mandibles and acid sprays, dropping improvised mines that clung like ticks to carapace armor before detonating. Boarding actions followed. Humans didn't wait to be boarded, they boarded the swarm. Marines launched grappling pods straight into hive ship hulls. They cut their way in with plasma torches and stormed the corridors, flamethrowers roaring, shotguns tearing through walls of flesh. A Keth officer watching the feeds trembled. They're insane. No species survives inside a hive. But the humans did. Because for every soldier dragged into the dark, 2 more went deeper, kicking and screaming, dragging their wounded back with them. They planted bombs in egg chambers, set fire to tunnels, and walked out covered in alien ichor, grinning through broken helmets. The aliens watch. On the Keth flagship, the survivors watched the madness unfold. They saw humans push beyond logic, beyond survival instinct. A Keth scientist whispered, almost reverently, "They don't fight to live. They fight because they refuse to die." Another added, voice shaking, "They are predators, and they have chosen to hunt the swarm." The price. Victory came at a cost. The Valiant's sister ship, Endurance, was lost, rammed by a hive ship that detonated itself to take her down. Hundreds of Marines never returned from the boarding actions. The medics worked until their hands bled, fighting to save even the most mangled survivors. But the impossible had happened. The swarm pulled back again. Not in full retreat, but in hesitation. For the first time in living memory, the hive mind had encountered something it did not understand. Prey was not supposed to fight like this. Prey was not supposed to hunt back. The aliens were shaken. Not just the Keth, but every core race monitoring the system. Word had already spread. Humans had stood against the swarm and lived. And that terrified them almost as much as it did the enemy. Captain Moreau. When the smoke cleared, Captain Moreau stood on the bridge, uniform burned and bloodied. Her XO asked what she thought the swarm would do next. "They'll come back," she said simply. "And they'll come harder." The Keth envoy stepped forward. "And what will you do?" She looked at him, eyes burning with the fire of her world. "What we always do," she said. "Adapt. Improvise. Overcome." And then she smiled. "Welcome to the human way." The swarm regrouped faster than anyone expected. 3 days after the last battle, the void shuddered with their return. Hundreds of hive ships emerged from fold space, blotting out the stars like an approaching storm. They moved in perfect unison, pulsing with eerie bioluminescence, each heartbeat echoing through the scanners of the human fleet. "They've brought a brood cluster," Dr. Hayes whispered, staring at the readings. "That's millions of drones. Maybe more." On the Keth flagship, the survivors stared at the swarm in despair. "No one survives a cluster," one muttered. "This is the end." But the humans didn't look defeated. Captain Moreau stood at the center of the Valiant's bridge, eyes steady. "Then we hit them before they hit us. All ships, advance." The order sent a ripple of disbelief through the alien observers. No one advanced on the swarm, but humans did. The first engagement. The fleet surged forward like wolves throwing themselves at a bear. Missiles streaked across the black, detonating with brutal force. Railguns ripped through living hulls. Fighters screamed past in chaotic swarms, weaving between the drones. The swarm responded in kind. Acidic projectiles sprayed from organic cannons, tearing into steel. Drones latched onto hulls, tearing their way inside like parasites breaking skin. But the humans had learned. On the Resolute, when swarm drones breached the hangar, the Marines didn't retreat. They opened the blast doors and vented the atmosphere, along with themselves. They fought in the freezing vacuum, magnetic boots clinging to the hull, shotguns firing into the dark. Their screams of defiance carried over comms until the last drone was dead. On the Ironheart, engineers turned cargo drones into kamikaze weapons, welding explosives onto their frames and sending them straight into the swarm. The core races would have called it a war crime. Humans called it Tuesday. The boarding actions. Then came the boarding. Humanity had no illusions about defense. The swarm would breach their ships no matter what. So instead, they chose to breach first. Dropships slammed into hive ships, cutting open their carapaces like can openers. Marines stormed in, not with precision but with fury. Move! Burn it all! Sergeant Alvarez bellowed as a squad poured into a fleshy corridor. Flamethrowers roared, drowning the tunnels in fire. The swarm screamed. Egg chambers exploded. Drones boiled alive in molten plasma. Humans left mines behind as they moved, detonating them when reinforcements swarmed in. And when they reached the heart of the hive ships, the pulsating nodes of living tissue that pulsed with the hive mind's will, they didn't hesitate. They strapped explosives to their own armor, held the detonators tight, and laughed as they blew themselves to pieces, taking the nodes with them. The Keth watching the feeds recoiled in horror. They sacrificed themselves willingly? Dr. Hayes didn't look away. His voice was cold. That's the difference. We don't fear death as much as we fear losing. The swarm adapts. But the swarm wasn't idle. Already, its ships shifted, armor hardening against railgun rounds. Drones mutated mid-battle, sprouting spines that fired like artillery. New weapons, new tactics, all unfolding in minutes. The aliens despaired. It learns too quickly, they'll be overwhelmed. But the humans adapted faster. When acid ate through armor, they wrapped themselves in ceramic plating scavenged from Keth ruins. When drones started swarming their fighters, pilots began flying suicide spirals, dragging drones straight into their own hive ships before ejecting at the last second. When the swarm fired spines the size of trees, human destroyers caught them on armored hulls, then launched them back like harpoons. Every move the swarm made, the humans twisted into something they could use. It was no longer a battle. It was a contest of insanity. And the humans were winning. The turning of the tide. Hours into the battle, the first hive ship collapsed, breaking apart in fire and ichor. Then another. And another. The swarm shrieked across the void, a psychic wail that rattled alien skulls. But humans only grinned. Listen to that. Sergeant Alvarez chuckled, covered in ichor. Even the bugs are scared now. The Keth commander, watching from his flagship, whispered in awe. Impossible, they're forcing the swarm back. For the first time in history, a brood cluster faltered. The cost. But victory was blood-soaked. The Resolute was torn apart, its final transmission laughter and gunfire as its Marines detonated the reactor to take a hive ship with them. Entire squadrons were lost in kamikaze runs. Medical bays overflowed, human doctors screaming at the aliens to hold down thrashing soldiers while parasites were burned from their bodies. And yet, despite it all, the swarm retreated again. Not out of strategy, not out of patience, but out of something else. Fear. After the battle, when the silence finally fell, the human fleet limped among the wreckage. Half its ships were crippled. Thousands of its soldiers were dead. But the swarm had been broken. The Keth commander spoke softly, his voice trembling with something between awe and terror. No one has ever done this. The swarm does not retreat. The swarm does not fear. Captain Morrow stared at the stars, her eyes hollow but unbroken. Now it does. The battlefield was silent now, but silence in space is never peace. The void was littered with corpses, metal, flesh, and something between. Shattered hive ships drifted among the wreckage of human cruisers. Fires burned inside cracked hulls, their embers glowing like dying stars. The swarm had fled. For the first time in galactic history, it had pulled back in disarray. But victory was a hollow word. On the Valiant, the corridors reeked of antiseptic and blood. The medbay overflowed, wounded sprawled across the floor when there were no more beds. Nurses and medics moved like ghosts, their uniforms soaked red, hands trembling from exhaustion. "Hold him down," Dr. Ramon shouted as a soldier convulsed on the table, his veins bulging with black ichor. She plunged a scalpel into his chest, pulling out a writhing parasite and tossing it into a sterilizer where it burned to ash. The soldier's screams faded to sobs. His hand gripped hers weakly. "Did I make it?" "You're still here," she said softly, though her eyes knew the truth. Some wounds never healed. The alien perspective. On the Keth flagship, survivors gathered before holoscreens showing human tria. They watched in disbelief as doctors fought for every life, even those too far gone. One Keth medic whispered, "They fight the parasites one by one, even when it is hopeless?" Another answered, voice heavy with awe, "Yes. They cannot accept loss, not even of a single soldier." The Keth commander remained silent, his compound eyes fixed on the human wounded, on the screams, the stubborn refusal to give up. "They are not like us," he murmured. "When we see death, we bow our heads. They bare their teeth." The horror of victory. In the hangar of the Ironheart, the returning Marines staggered out of their dropships. Armor melted, visors cracked, some limping with missing limbs. And yet they grinned. 3 hive ships down, Sergeant Alvarez said, covered head to toe in ichor. "Hell of a day." He collapsed mid-step, unconscious from blood loss. Nearby, a squad sat together, silent for once. One of them clutched a helmet, the helmet of a friend who hadn't made it back. Another smeared alien blood across his face in a crude war paint, whispering. He went out laughing. That's how he wanted it. For every smile, there was a tear. For every victory, an empty bunk. The fracture. Not all aliens saw hope in the humans. On the council relay, where distant core race leaders observed via encrypted channels, debate raged. "They are not saviors," hissed a veiled diplomat. "They are butchers. They wage war with madness, not strategy." "But they won," countered a Shan elder, her voice trembling. "No one has ever made the swarm retreat. No one." The veiled diplomat's eyes narrowed. "And at what cost? They mutilate themselves. They hurl their own lives away. They are Deathworlders, too dangerous to be unleashed." A silence fell, because deep down, everyone watching had felt it too, all laced with fear. Humanity was hope, yes, but hope wrapped in barbed wire. Captain Morrow. On the Valiant's bridge, Captain Morrow stared out at the wreckage. Her reflection in the glass looked older than it had days ago. Her XO approached quietly. "We lost nearly a third of our fleet, Captain. At this rate, even if we win, there won't be much of us left." Morrow's jaw tightened. She thought of the wounded, the laughter of soldiers trying to hide their pain, the faces of the dead. "Maybe," she said softly, "but if we don't fight, there won't be anyone left." She turned, her eyes burning. "We've shown the swarm we're not prey. Now, we show them we're predators." The swarm reacts. Across the system, in the darkness where no human ship could see, the swarm pulsed with agitation. It was not used to losing. It was not used to fear. But something about these new enemies gnawed at the hive mind. They were fragile, weak, divided, and yet they would not break. The hive mind shifted, adapted, planned. If the humans wanted to be predators, then the swarm would remind them what it meant to face a galaxy-devouring beast. The war was far from over. The swarm had retreated, but not destroyed. Humanity knew it would come back stronger, hungrier. And when it did, the scattered fleets of the Galactic Council would not be enough. So the humans began to plan, not for survival, but for dominance. Operation Glasshammer. Captain Morrow stood at the tactical table, staring at the projected system map. Red markers bloomed across it, swarm fleets regrouping in distant sectors. Her officers argued behind her. Conventional strikes won't work. They'll adapt. Then we go unconventional. We've already lost too many. She slammed her fist down. The room fell silent. We stop playing defense. We bleed them. Everywhere. All the time. Until there's nothing left. Her eyes burned with resolve. They came to our galaxy thinking we were prey. Let's prove we're poison. The traps. Within weeks, swarm fleets began encountering strange anomalies. Dead colonies rigged with nuclear warheads. When the swarm descended to harvest biomass, entire planets detonated, bathing them in radioactive fire. Ghost ships broadcasting distress calls. When the swarm latched onto feast, hidden warheads vaporized them. Orbital mines disguised as debris fields. Thousands of drones lay dormant, then awoke with a single purpose: suicide ramming runs. The galaxy watched in horror as swarm losses mounted. No one had ever fought like this before. No one had dared. Psychological warfare. But humanity didn't stop at bombs. They began speaking to the swarm. On open channels, human voices mocked the hive. Soldiers broadcast recordings of laughter during battles, the kind of manic joy only Deathworlders could summon. Come and get us, you bastards. You hungry? We're still standing. You'll choke on us before we ever bow. The swarm, for the first time in its existence, hesitated. Its hive mind felt confusion, frustration, fear. The alien response. On the Keth flagship, Commander Valen and his council watched as human fleets unleashed another ambush. A swarm armada was annihilated by a single automated asteroid rigged with hundreds of nuclear warheads. One Keth officer whispered, "They are monsters." Valen's mandibles clicked. "No. They are something worse. They are survivors." Yet in the alien council chambers across the galaxy, fear spread. Some races began to question whether unleashing humanity had been wise. If they win this war, one veiled diplomat said darkly, what will stop them from turning these horrors on us? The cost. But humanity was bleeding too. Each victory came at staggering cost. Ships reduced to scrap, soldiers buried in mass graves, families on Earth weeping over empty coffins. On the Iron Heart, Sergeant Alvarez led what was left of his squad through the med bay. Only 3 of the original 12 remained. "We're ghosts," muttered one Marine, staring at the rows of the dead. "No," Alvarez said quietly. His eyes were haunted, but hard. "We're the reason they're still afraid of the dark." The swarm adapts. But the swarm was learning too. Where once it threw itself blindly into traps, now it tested first. Where once it consumed slowly, now it harvested entire planets in hours before vanishing again. And it began building something new. On the edge of the system, deep within a nebula, the swarm wove together wreckage and flesh into a monstrous construct. Larger than any hive ship, pulsing with energy, bristling with weapons. The swarm had seen humanity's traps, and it was preparing a nightmare of its own. The turning point. In her ready room, Captain Morrow received the latest intelligence. The swarm's new weapon was nearly complete. If it launched, entire fleets could be wiped out in a single blow. She stared at the report, then whispered, "God help us. We've woken something worse." But she clenched her jaw and stood tall. "Then we kill it first." The swarm had always been terrifying, but this was something else. Reports from long-range probes painted the picture. A ship larger than moons, constructed from biomass, stolen alloys, and the remains of 100 fleets. Its hull pulsed like muscle, its cannons writhed like living veins, and its core blazed with stolen stars. It was not just a ship. It was alive. The swarm called it the Leviathan. The first strike. The Leviathan emerged from the nebula in silence. Entire fleets scrambled to meet it, thousands of ships unleashing fire. Lasers, plasma, railguns, all of it vanished into the Leviathan's flesh. Some of the shots bounced. Others were absorbed. Then the beast answered. It opened its maw and screamed. The sound was not heard but felt, a psychic wail that shredded unprotected minds. Entire crews went mad in their chairs, clawing at their faces, killing each other before they even saw the physical weapon. A beam of white-hot energy that tore through 3 battleships and split a planet's moon in half. The galaxy had never seen such a weapon. Humanity had. They called it what it was. A death ray, one soldier whispered. The biggest damn death ray in the universe. Council collapse. Panic gripped the alien council. Some demanded retreat. Others begged humanity to unleash more nuclear fire. One faction even proposed abandoning the galaxy entirely. In the chaos, Commander Valen of the Keth spoke. Flee, and it will consume you one by one. Stand, and perhaps the humans' madness will carry us through. Every alien eye turned toward the Terran delegation. Captain Morrow simply said, "We'll take the fight to its heart. But we won't survive it unless you stand with us." The council fell silent. For the first time, the galaxy realized what humanity had known from the beginning. This was not a war of attrition. It was extermination. Operation Spearpoint. The plan was suicidal. The Leviathan was too large to be destroyed from the outside. Its armor was a planet's worth of flesh and alloy. So humanity proposed something unthinkable. A direct assault inside the beast. Specially modified dropships, armored coffins with engines, would crash through its hide. Marines, engineers, and demolition crews would carve their way to its core and plant antimatter warheads. The rest of the fleet? Their job was simple. By time. The insertion. Sergeant Alvarez strapped into his seat, his squad around him. None of them spoke. The dropship rattled as it hit atmosphere, the Leviathan's atmosphere. Inside its body, pressure and gravity shifted like a nightmare. "Buckle up, boys," Alvarez growled. "We're storming a goddamn planet-sized lung." The dropship slammed through wet, quivering flesh. Organic fluids splattered across the viewport. The squad charged out into corridors of muscle and bone, lit by bioluminescent veins. The walls breathed. One Marine vomited in her helmet. Another whispered, "This isn't a ship. It's hell." Inside the beast, the swarm's immune system attacked. Creatures poured from the walls, twisted hybrids of ships and soldiers, screaming in unison. Plasma rifles lit up the darkness as the Marines fought tooth and nail, slipping in blood and bile. "Keep moving," Alvarez roared, mowing down a 6-limbed abomination. "We get to the core, or none of this matters." Behind them, demolition teams dragged the antimatter charges. Every step was a massacre, every hallway a gauntlet. One by one, soldiers fell. But the survivors pressed on. Humanity had no other choice. The fleets stand. Outside, the galaxy burned. Terran and alien ships swarmed the Leviathan like gnats against a dragon. Thousands were annihilated by its beam, but still they pressed in. Keth warcruisers rammed its cannons, detonating in nuclear fire. Veil fleets sacrificed themselves to shield human carriers. On the bridge of the Iron Heart, Captain Morrow stood calm despite the chaos. "Keep firing," she said coldly. "If we're going to die, let it choke on our bones." The core. Deep inside the Leviathan, Alvarez and what was left of his squad finally reached it. The core was a star, caged in bone and muscle, pulsing with stolen energy. The heat seared their armor. The psychic wail clawed at their sanity. "Plant the charges," Alvarez shouted. The demolition crew scrambled, setting antimatter warheads along the glowing arteries. One Marine, half mad, stared at the core and whispered, "It's alive. It knows we're here." And indeed, the core's pulsing quickened. The walls began to convulse. The Leviathan was trying to kill them. The sacrifice. The charges were set, but the remote detonator was smashed in the fighting. There was only one way. Alvarez grabbed the manual trigger. His squad stared at him. "Sergeant, you've got families." "I don't." He smiled grimly. "Besides, someone's gotta make sure this bastard stays dead." He shoved the others toward the dropship. "Go. Tell them humanity didn't go quietly." The end of the Leviathan. The squad barely made it out as Alvarez stood before the core, trigger in hand. He looked up at the pulsing star and spat blood. "From Earth with love." He pressed the button. The antimatter warheads went off. The Leviathan convulsed, its scream shaking the void itself. The beast erupted in white fire, tearing itself apart from the inside out. Outside, fleets scattered as chunks of burning flesh and alloy rained across the stars. The Leviathan was gone. For now. Aftermath. On the Iron Heart, silence reigned as the crew watched the monster's corpse drift. Cheers broke out, then sobs. For the first time in years, they had won not just a battle, but a turning point. But Captain Moreau did not celebrate. She knew the swarm was not finished. The Leviathan had been their masterpiece. And something told her they had more nightmares waiting to be born. The battlefield burned. Wreckage from both swarm and human ships drifted through the void, glowing faintly against the stars. The swarm Leviathan loomed in the distance, wounded but still alive, its titanic form blotting out constellations. It pulsed like a beating heart, and it was healing. The impossible plan. Captain Moreau stood before her exhausted officers on the Iron Heart. "We can't kill it from the outside," she said flatly. "Its armor grows back faster than we can strip it away." Her chief engineer leaned forward. "Then what are you suggesting?" Moreau's eyes were cold steel. "We go inside." Silence. The crew stared at her, as though she had gone mad. "Infiltration." Alvarez finally asked, his voice hollow. "Not infiltration," Moreau corrected. "Extermination. We board the Leviathan, find its core, and burn it out from within." The boarding. The Iron Heart, half crippled but still defiant, led a suicide run. It tore through the Leviathan's outer shell, spewing railgun fire and nuclear-tipped missiles until a gaping wound opened in its flesh. Dropships launched into the wound like insects crawling into a wound. Inside was not machinery, not steel, not even flesh in the way anyone understood. It was alive. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, dripping with ichor that floated in zero gravity. Chitinous ridges twisted into grotesque corridors. Every sound was muffled, as though the ship itself was breathing. "Jesus Christ," muttered Alvarez as a squad advanced through the alien interior. "We're walking through its guts." Inside the beast. The swarm reacted. Drones poured through the tunnels, shrieking as they swarmed the human marines. Gunfire erupted in the narrow confines, tearing through alien flesh and bone. Every burst of bullets made the walls twitch, as if the Leviathan felt the pain. Grenades shredded whole clusters of drones, painting the corridors in gore. But with every enemy that fell, more came. "They're endless," shouted one soldier, firing until his rifle overheated. "No," Alvarez growled, cutting through another wave with his shotgun. "Not endless. Just in the way." The heart of the hive. At last, the survivors reached it. A vast chamber, glowing with blinding light. Suspended in the center was the hive core, a pulsating, crystalline organ that thrummed with psychic energy. Tendrils of flesh stretched out from it, running through every part of the Leviathan. And clustered around it were thousands of swarm drones, protecting it with religious devotion. "Looks like we found God's heart," whispered Alvarez. "Then let's kill it," said Moreau. The final stand. The Marines unleashed hell. Rocket fire and railguns tore through defenders, but the swarm came crashing in from every side. Claws ripped through armor. Screams echoed in the chamber. Marines fell one after another, but the survivors fought like demons. Alvarez planted explosives at the base of the hive core while his squad covered him. "Charges set," he yelled. "Detonate." Moreau barked. "Not yet." Alvarez roared back. "They'll heal it before it goes critical." He grabbed the detonator and sprinted forward, charging straight into the swarm. The last thing Moreau saw was Alvarez disappearing beneath a wave of claws, before the chamber erupted in white fire. The beast falls. The Leviathan convulsed. From the outside, ships watched as the living colossus split open, spewing flames and ichor into the void. Its psychic scream tore through every mind across the system. Then, slowly, the Leviathan went still. Dead. The battlefield fell silent. Humanity had done it. They had killed a god. But at what cost? The survivors were few. The Iron Heart limped away, hull torn apart, crew broken and bloodied. Moreau stood at the viewport, staring at the corpse of the Leviathan. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. "We've shown the galaxy what humans can do," she whispered. Behind her, a medic asked, "Do you think the swarm will come back?" Moreau's jaw clenched. She didn't answer, because she knew the truth. The swarm was endless, and what they had killed was only one of many. The Leviathan was gone. Its corpse drifted in the void, glowing faintly as it decomposed in zero gravity. The surviving fleets of humans and their alien allies hung among the wreckage, silent. Ships limped home, some barely functional, others mere fragments patched together with jury-rigged tech. The medbays overflowed with wounded, many beyond saving. Humanity had won, but the cost was staggering. The toll on the fleet. On the Iron Heart, Captain Moreau moved through the medbay, her face streaked with grime and blood. Every bunk held a soldier whose eyes were hollow with shock, or whose bodies were scarred beyond recognition. "Status?" she asked the medical officer. 3,000 dead, the officer said flatly. 5,000 critically wounded. And these are only the ones we've recovered. Many were vaporized in the blast. Moreau closed her eyes. A wave of grief pressed on her chest, but she pushed it down. This was not the time to break. In the corridors, survivors whispered stories of comrades who had sacrificed themselves to reach the core, who had fought until their last breath, who had stared into the maw of the Leviathan and laughed despite knowing they would die. It was heroic.
And it was horrifying.
The galaxy watches. Across the stars, news of humanity's triumph spread like wildfire. Core races, Keth, Vale, Shan, and others, watched in awe, fear, and disbelief. Humans had not only destroyed the Leviathan, a super hive ship designed to consume entire fleets, they had done it with tactics the galaxy considered insane. Kamikaze drops, bioweapon improvisations, psychic warfare. "They are not like us," whispered one Keth officer to his commander. "They are predators, not allies." The council debated in whispers and shouts. Some races wanted to ally with humanity, to use their ferocity against remaining swarm hives. Others feared that if humans survived, they would become a power none could control. "If they can kill gods," a veiled diplomat murmured, "what stops them from turning on us?" The survivor's burden. On board the human ships, the survivors struggled to process what they had done. Many could not sleep. Dreams were haunted by alien screams, ichor-slit corridors, and the faces of comrades who had died in agony. Dr. Aisha Rahman, one of the lead medics, moved from soldier to soldier, bandaging wounds and whispering reassurances she didn't feel. Her own hands shook. Sergeant Alvarez, returning from the Leviathan's core, sat alone on the observation deck, staring at the remnants of the beast. His armor was scorched, his body battered, but his eyes burned with grim determination. "They thought they could scare us," he muttered. "They thought death would stop us. It didn't." The price of victory. Victory was not just measured in bodies or destroyed hives. It was in the scars humanity now carried, physical, psychological, and cosmic. The Keth commander, standing aboard the Valiant, observed the humans quietly. He had fought alongside them, seen their madness, their brutality, their resilience. "They are terrifying," he said softly.
"We saved the galaxy, yes.
But at what cost? And at what risk to ourselves?" Even Captain Moreau felt the weight. She had led her crew to victory, but the memory of every life lost, every scream, every explosion, burned in her mind. "We survived," she whispered to herself. But survival is just the beginning. A galaxy uneasy. As humans limped home, the council convened. Alien leaders no longer saw humanity as simply a new ally. They saw a force that had rewritten the rules of survival, a species that could wage war in ways no one dared imagine. Hope for the galaxy remained, yes. The Leviathan was dead. The swarm had been shattered. But humanity had shown that they would not bend, that they would not bow, and that their methods were as ruthless as they were effective. For some, this was inspiring.
For others, it was terrifying.
And in the shadows, whispers began. Perhaps humanity is not the shield of the galaxy, but its sword. The void was quiet. After the Leviathan's destruction, the debris drifted in silence among the stars. Human and alien fleets hovered in exhaustion, staring at the wreckage of what had been the deadliest weapon the galaxy had ever known. Victory had come, but it was hollow. The survivors return. The Valiant limped toward human space, battered and burned, its hull scarred with countless impacts. Captain Moreau walked the bridge, her uniform blackened, her face drawn and pale. She had led her crew to victory, but the cost weighed heavily on her shoulders. Ships returned in fragments. Survivors were few. Families across human worlds grieved. Medics cried in corridors they had once walked with determination, now broken by the screams of the dying. Sergeant Alvarez, one of the few who had survived the core mission inside the Leviathan, collapsed in the med bay. We did it," he whispered, voice hoarse. "But, God, we lost so many." Captain Moreau laid a hand on his shoulder.
"Yes.
But we survived. And survival is the first step." The galaxy reacts. Across the core races, the news spread. Humanity had destroyed a godlike hive ship. Entire fleets had been annihilated, yet humans had pressed forward, taking the fight into the heart of the beast itself. The Keth, Vale, and Shan convened an emergency council. The debate was heated. "They saved countless lives," one Keth delegate said, voice trembling. "They fought with courage no species has ever shown." Another spoke darkly, and with madness.
"Do you not see?
They will not stop. If humanity can kill a Leviathan, what is to stop them from turning that power on us?" In the shadows of the council chambers, whispers spread like fire. The humans are no longer allies. They are predators. The psychological cost. Back on human ships, the survivors struggled with the aftermath. Some could not sleep. Every dream was haunted by the Leviathan's psychic screams, the screams of comrades, the visions of alien flesh twisting around their feet. Many medics and soldiers developed a nervous stoicism. They spoke little, laughed less, and carried their trauma in silence. Dr. Aisha Rahman, her hands shaking from exhaustion, moved through the med bay one last time. "We saved lives," she whispered, "but at the cost of so many others. How do we live with this?" Moreau, standing at the observation deck, looked out at the stars. "We do what humans have always done," she said quietly. "We adapt. We endure. And we remember." A new threat looms. The Leviathan was gone, but the swarm was not dead. Far beyond human space, in dark nebulae, the swarm's remnants pulsed and gathered. The hive mind had been shattered, but fragments had survived. They whispered, evolved, and learned from their defeat. The galaxy's leaders knew this. Humanity knew this. Everyone knew the truth. The war was not over. And the humans had changed. Where once the galaxy had seen humanity as one species among many, they now saw a force unstoppable, relentless, and terrifying. Humanity had survived the impossible, and in doing so, had become something new, a predator, forged by war, tempered by sacrifice, and feared by all. The choice. Captain Moreau's final orders to her crew were simple. Return home.
Heal. Prepare.
The swarm will return, and so will others who would test us. But know this, we are no longer prey. We are the ones who set the terms of survival. The stars stretched before them, infinite and indifferent. Humanity had survived the swarm. They had faced death itself. And in the quiet after the storm, they understood a truth no alien race had ever comprehended. The universe might fear them, even hate them, but humanity would endure. And when it struck back, it would strike with the fury of a species that had stared into the void and refused to blink.